The air in Cedar Falls carried a chill that night, the kind that crept into old houses and made floorboards groan under anxious feet. Emily Harper stood by the kitchen sink, her trembling hands scrubbing the same dish over and over, though it had long been clean. Behind her, the living room lights flickered against walls stained with shadows. Her boyfriend Mark was pacing again, his voice rising, words sharp and bitter from too many sleepless nights and too much worry about bills, jobs, and life's relentless unfairness. Outside, rain whispered against the windows. Inside, 3-year-old Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching his favorite stuffed rabbit. His wide brown eyes darted between his mother and Mark, confusion painted across his little face. He didn't understand the words, but he understood tone, and tonight, the tone was loud and dangerous. "Emily, I told you I was trying," Mark shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. "They cut my hours. What am I supposed to do?" "I'm not blaming you, Mark," Emily pleaded. "I'm scared. We can't live like this anymore. Noah can't live like this." The sound of breaking glass cut through her words. The dish slipped from her wet fingers, shattering on the floor. That sharp, echoing crack would later blend with another far deadlier sound that would change everything. From across the street, neighbors turned toward the noise. Someone whispered, "They're fighting again." Another picked up the phone. Within minutes, red and blue lights sliced through the darkness, reflecting off rain-slicked pavement. The low rumble of an engine, the crunch of boots on gravel, and then barking. Sharp, controlled, trained barking. Officer Daniels stepped out of his cruiser, his gloved hand resting on the leash of his canine partner, Rex, a powerful German shepherd with alert golden eyes. Daniels had been on the force 12 years. Calm, disciplined, and by the book. Tonight would test all of that. Unit 5 responding. Possible domestic disturbance, came the crackle over his radio. Daniels looked toward the small house, where a woman's silhouette trembled behind a curtain. "Let's go, boy," he murmured, and Rex's tail stiffened with focus. Inside, Emily froze when she saw the flashing lights through the window. "Mark, they're here," she whispered, panic tightening her throat. Mark turned, fear flashing in his eyes. "Emily, I didn't touch you. Tell them that, please." She nodded, but her words tangled with tears. The doorknob rattled. "Police!" A voice called. "Open up." Emily hesitated a moment too long. Mark stepped forward, his voice defensive, strained. "I didn't do anything wrong," he shouted. The door swung open. 2 officers entered, Daniels and his partner, Officer Ruiz. The room filled with tension, so thick even the air seemed to hold its breath. Rex's claws clicked softly against the hardwood as he followed, muscles coiled, waiting for a command. "Sir, step back," Daniels said firmly, his hand hovering near his weapon. "We just want to talk." Mark took a step forward instead. "Talk? You show up like this, like I'm some criminal." Rex barked suddenly, loud and sharp, breaking the fragile silence. Emily screamed, clutching Noah tight against her chest. In that split second, everything became noise, shouts, movement, the dog lunging forward, the sound of furniture scraping. Mark flinched, throwing up his hands, and Daniels's instincts took over. Bang! The gunshot tore through the chaos. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then came the wail-long, piercing, human. Emily fell to her knees beside Mark, who lay clutching his side, gasping. "Oh my God, Mark! Stay with me!" She sobbed. Daniels froze, eyes wide behind his visor, gun still drawn. Rex stood rigid beside him, panting, ears pinned back. Ruiz rushed to the fallen man, shouting into his radio for an ambulance. Officer involved shooting, 1 civilian down. Emily's shaking voice filled the room. He wasn't fighting. He didn't do anything. Daniels's mind was spinning. He lunged. He moved fast. The dog reacted first. His training screamed for control, but guilt began its slow, suffocating crawl. "Ma'am, please stand back," he ordered, his tone unsteady. Noah peeked from behind Emily's shoulder. His small voice, fragile yet piercing, broke through the storm of sirens and shouting. "Doggy hurt him. Doggy hurt him." The words were so soft that only Emily heard them at first. She turned, holding him closer. "Baby." But Noah said it again, louder this time. "Doggy hurt him." Rex whined, pacing. Daniels's jaw tightened. He couldn't look at the child. Ruiz caught his partner's uneasy glance, but said nothing. The ambulance sirens wailed closer, their growing sound like a scream in the night. Outside, the neighborhood gathered in murmurs and flashlights. The red glow from emergency vehicles painted everything in shades of panic. Cameras flashed from curious onlookers' phones, capturing fragments of a tragedy they'd soon forget, but Emily never would. Mark was lifted onto a stretcher, blood soaking through his shirt. He reached for Emily's hand. "Tell them." "I didn't," his voice faltered. "Please." She nodded, tears streaking down her face. "I will." Daniels stepped back, watching the paramedics load Mark into the ambulance. His chest felt tight, every heartbeat echoing in his ears. "You followed procedure," he told himself. "You had no choice." But deep down, something gnawed at him, something that wouldn't quiet no matter how hard he tried. When the scene finally cleared, Emily sat on the curb, Noah in her lap, wrapped in a blanket one of the officers had given her. The cold rain turned her hair into wet strands clinging to her face. Daniels approached, helmet tucked under his arm, expression composed but weary. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I need your statement." She looked up at him, eyes hollow. "You already have it," she whispered. "He didn't fight. He was scared. And your dog jumped first." Daniels swallowed hard, unable to respond. Rex sat beside him, obedient and silent, as if he too knew something had gone wrong. Noah looked at the dog again and said one last time, softly but firmly, "Doggy hurt him." Daniels turned away. Hours later, as dawn broke over Cedar Falls, the rain had stopped, but the chill remained. Yellow tape fluttered outside the small house. Inside, the shattered glass still glittered on the floor like frozen tears. A single bloodstain near the sofa had already begun to darken. Emily stood in the doorway, holding Noah. The world outside felt foreign, now louder, crueler. A reporter tried to approach, but she turned away, locking the door behind her. She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mark's face, the flash of the muzzle, and that terrible second of silence before Noah's words echoed again in her memory. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Officer Daniels sat alone at his desk, staring at the preliminary report on his computer screen. Suspect resisted. K-9 engaged. Officer discharged weapon in response. It read clean, procedural, and cold. The kind of report that ended investigations before they began. He rubbed his temples, the weight of what happened pressing down on him. He told himself he'd done what he had to, but a small voice inside whispered that wasn't the whole truth. He reached down and patted Rex's head. The dog looked up, loyal and trusting, unaware of the storm his instincts had unleashed. Daniels whispered, "We did what we were trained to do." But the words rang hollow in the empty room. Across town, Emily sat by Noah's bed, watching him sleep. His small hand clutched his rabbit tight, his face peaceful in the dim light. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, whispering to herself, "He saw everything. He saw the truth." Outside, the first morning light touched the wet pavement. And for the first time in hours, Cedar Falls was quiet again. But in that quiet, one truth waited, fragile, small, and easily ignored. It had been spoken by a child's voice in the middle of chaos, and though no one yet understood its power, those few words would soon echo far beyond that rain-soaked night. Doggy hurt him. Detective Miguel Alvarez arrived just after 8. He was in his mid-40s, the kind of man whose calm presence spoke louder than his words. A former beat cop with a reputation for patience, Alvarez carried himself differently, and the uniforms buzzing around him slower, more deliberate, as if he didn't just see a crime scene, but the story hiding inside it. He stepped through the doorway and took in the details. A shattered plate glittering under morning light, a toppled chair, a smear of dried blood near the hallway. The faint smell of bleach drifted through the air. Someone had already tried to clean. "Officer involved, domestic," said Ruiz, tiredly flipping through his notepad. The guy marked Clayton took a shot to the side, non-lethal, claims he didn't resist, but the report says he got aggressive. Officer Daniels' canine lunged first. Standard use-of-force chain. Alvarez didn't answer right away. He crouched, studying the blood spatter near the sofa. It wasn't much, just a fine mist on the upholstery, but it told him something. The shot came from low too low to match the narrative of a standing man charging an officer. He stood, brushing his hands on his coat. "Where's the woman?" "Emily Harper. She's at County General with the kid. They stayed overnight for observation," Ruiz said. "We'll get her statement when she's ready. She's shaken up bad." Alvarez nodded. "Good. Let her rest. Panic distorts truth. Fear distorts it worse." He walked to the window and looked out at the rain-soaked street. A few neighbors stood behind the tape, whispering, watching. He'd seen the scene before, tragedy transforming into gossip before the blood had even dried. He sighed, taking one last look around. Something didn't fit. At the hospital, Emily sat in a sterile white room, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink. Noah was asleep in a chair beside her, his small chest rising and falling with the peace only children could find after chaos. When Alvarez entered, she tensed. "Mrs. Harper?" he asked softly, stopping a few feet away. She nodded, voice faint. "It's Miss Harper." He smiled slightly. "Right, Miss Harper. I'm Detective Alvarez. I'm here to ask a few questions, but we can stop any time you need." Her eyes flickered toward Noah. "Can we do this quietly?" "Of course." He pulled up a chair. "Tell me what happened last night, from your perspective." Emily hesitated, eyes distant. It all happened so fast. We were arguing, yes, but Mark wasn't violent. He's never been. When the police came, he panicked. He thought they'd take him away. Did he threaten you or the officers? No, he just shouted. He was scared. Alvarez watched her carefully. And the dog? Her lips trembled. It barked, loudly. Then it jumped. At Mark, he raised his hands, and the gun went off. That's all I saw. Alvarez jotted a few notes. Did you hear Officer Daniels give the command to engage? No, she whispered. Not once. He looked up from his notebook, studying her trembling hands. Miss Harper, I'm going to be honest with you. These things rarely go clean. Reports are written to protect the department first, people second. But truth has a way of finding cracks. Tears gathered in her eyes. He didn't deserve this, she said, voice breaking. Mark's not perfect, but he didn't deserve a bullet. Alvarez nodded. I believe you. And I'll find out what really happened. She glanced down at Noah, who stirred in his chair. The boy blinked sleepily and murmured, Doggy hurt him. Alvarez froze mid-note. What did he say? Emily sighed softly. He's been saying that since last night. I think he's just confused. The detective leaned back. Maybe. Or maybe he saw more than anyone else. By midday, Alvarez was back at the precinct, standing in front of a grainy monitor, replaying the body cam footage from Daniels's vest. The video flickered shaky from the adrenaline of the moment, but clear enough to tell a story. He watched the door open, the shouting, Rex's bark echoing in the small room. Then the movement. Freeze frame. Alvarez leaned closer. There just before the gun fired, Rex's muscles tensed, teeth bared, lunging forward before any visible motion from Mark. Daniels's weapon fired half a second later. Damn, Alvarez muttered under his breath. He rewound, played it again. Same thing. Ruiz, standing behind him, sighed. You really think Daniels screwed up? I think he reacted to his dog, not the man, Alvarez said. But that's not what he wrote in the report. Ruiz rubbed his neck. You gonna take this upstairs? Not yet, Alvarez replied. Not until I talk to Daniels himself. That evening, Daniels sat in his office, the glow from his desk lamp illuminating the paperwork stacked before him. His face was pale, drawn tight with exhaustion. When Alvarez knocked, he didn't look up. Come in. Alvarez stepped inside, closing the door quietly. Rough night, huh? Daniels exhaled through his nose. You could say that. I watched the footage. That got his attention. Daniels looked up sharply, eyes narrowing. And I think your dog reacted before Mark did. Daniels's jaw flexed. You weren't there, Alvarez. The guy was agitated. He moved fast. Rex picked up on it. He saved me. Or maybe you shot because Rex startled you? The silence stretched between them. Daniels's expression hardened. You're walking a fine line, detective. Alvarez met his gaze, unflinching. I'm just walking toward the truth. Daniels's shoulders slumped slightly, fatigue replacing anger. You ever pull the trigger, Alvarez? Once, he said quietly. And I still remember the man's face. Daniels looked away. Then you know. You don't think. You react. It's not about right or wrong. It's survival. Alvarez nodded slowly. I get that. But survival doesn't erase responsibility. He left without another word. Daniels sat alone, staring at the faint reflection of Rex sleeping in his kennel nearby. For the first time in his career, the badge on his chest felt heavier than his gun. The next morning, Alvarez reviewed the forensic report. It confirmed his suspicion. The bullet's trajectory came from a lower angle, inconsistent with a standing target. The bite mark on Mark's arm also didn't match a defensive wound. It was an impact reaction. The dog bit after the shot, not before. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, but no one wanted the picture they created. He glanced at the note he'd written the night before. Interview the boy again, carefully. Something about that little voice, that simple phrase, "Doggy hurt him," echoed in Alvarez's head. Kids didn't invent truth. They repeated it. He made a call to Emily. Miss Harper, I'd like to meet with Noah again. Maybe at your home, so we're comfortable. There was hesitation on the other end. He's just a child, detective. I know. But sometimes children see what adults overlook. When he hung up, he stared at his case file, a storm of doubt brewing inside him. He wasn't just chasing evidence anymore, he was chasing redemption. For a man bleeding in a hospital bed, a frightened woman, and a child who'd seen more than any child should. Outside his office window, Cedar Falls glowed with a dull amber of streetlights. The world was moving on, but Alvarez couldn't, not until he uncovered the truth hidden beneath the official version. He whispered to himself, "Doggy hurt him," and the words settled like a promise in his chest. He'd find out what they meant, no matter who didn't want him to. The weeks following the shooting passed like a slow-burning fever over Cedar Falls. What began as a neighborhood disturbance had grown into a case that stirred something raw in the small community: doubt. The local papers called it a tragic misunderstanding. The police department called it a justified response, and the internet called it everything in between. But for Emily Harper, it wasn't a headline. It was a nightmare that replayed every time she closed her eyes. The courtroom sat in the center of town, an old stone building whose high arches made everyone who entered feel smaller than they were. The trial had drawn quiet attention. People came not out of curiosity, but unease, like witnesses to a storm gathering in slow motion. Mark Clayton sat at the defense table, pale and thinner than before, his right arm still bandaged from both the bullet wound and the dog bite that marked the beginning of his unraveling. His lawyer, a weary public defender named Rachel Green, adjusted her glasses and whispered something that made him nod. Across the aisle, the state prosecutor sat with a stack of evidence folders, a badge of the Cedar Falls Police Department gleaming above them like a shield. And then there was Officer Daniels, sitting stiffly in uniform beside his attorney. His expression was stone, but his eyes betrayed the sleepless nights. Behind him, his canine partner Rex was not present, though Daniels occasionally reached for the empty space beside him, as if his hand still expected the leash. The prosecution opened with a clean, rehearsed precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Prosecutor Miller, his voice firm, "this case is about a man who refused to comply, who endangered an officer and forced a tragic but necessary response. Officer Daniels, a decorated member of our law enforcement family, acted by the book. The police dog, Rex, was trained to respond to threat, and he did exactly that. He paced slowly, each step echoing off the wooden floor. The defense will try to tell you this was a mistake. But the evidence, the reports, the witness statements, and the body cam footage will show that Officer Daniels had every reason to act as he did. He let the silence hang before his final line. This was not misconduct. This was duty. When it was Rachel's turn, she didn't pace. She stood still, her voice steady but sharp. Duty, she said quietly, does not mean shooting a man whose hands were raised. A murmur rippled through the gallery. She continued, her eyes never leaving the jury. This case isn't about compliance or aggression. It's about control. About a moment when fear replaced judgment. About an officer who trusted his instincts more than his training. And about a system that will always find a way to justify that. Her gaze shifted toward Daniels. We're not here to destroy reputations. We're here to tell the truth. The real one, the one that doesn't fit neatly into a report. She took a slow breath. And if that truth has to come from the smallest voice in this room, then so be it. For days, the courtroom filled with conflicting stories. Officer Ruiz testified first. His recollection was careful, measured, but his eyes flickered whenever Rachel pressed too close to the line. Did you hear Officer Daniels command the dog before Rex lunged? She asked. A pause. I can't recall, Ruiz said finally. You can't recall. Or it didn't happen. Another pause. The judge warned Rachel to stay within bounds. But the question lingered, unanswered. Then came Emily. Her presence shifted the room immediately. She was fragile but resolute, wearing a dark dress and a silver necklace that trembled slightly when she spoke. Noah sat with a court-appointed guardian outside, too young to understand the proceedings, but not forgotten, not by her, not by anyone. Miss Harper, Rachel began gently, in your own words, what happened that night? Emily swallowed, her voice trembling but clear. They came to the door. Mark was scared. He didn't have a weapon. He raised his hands. Then the dog jumped, and everything happened so fast. The gun went off. He fell. Did Mark ever attack the officers? No. He never even moved toward them. Across the room, Daniels shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His lawyer leaned in, whispering for him to remain still. Rachel nodded slowly. And your son, Noah, he was there. Emily's lips parted slightly. Yes, he saw everything. Rachel hesitated. Miss Harper, what did Noah say afterward? Emily blinked back tears. He kept saying, "Doggy hurt him," over and over. That simple sentence landed heavier than any accusation. The prosecutor objected immediately. Speculation. The child is 3 years old. He can't possibly understand what happened. Withdrawn, Rachel said smoothly, but the damage was already done. The jury had heard it. Later that afternoon, Daniels took the stand. His uniform was crisp, his posture perfect, the picture of professionalism. But under the bright lights, his skin looked paler than usual, and his right hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie. Officer Daniels, the prosecutor began, can you describe the events of that night? Yes, Daniels said, his tone clipped. We responded to a domestic disturbance. The male suspect was agitated and refused to comply. He made a sudden movement toward me, and my canine partner Rex perceived a threat. In the course of controlling the situation, my weapon discharged. Rachel stood. You say, in the course of controlling the situation. Was your weapon fired intentionally? A pause. Daniel's jaw tightened. Yes, it was a justified response to a perceived threat. Perceived, Rachel repeated. Meaning there was no confirmed threat. Ma'am, I didn't have the luxury of waiting for confirmation. Her tone softened, but her eyes sharpened. No, officer. You didn't wait because your dog reacted first. Isn't that true? The courtroom held its breath. Daniel stared at her, face rigid. No, he said quietly. That's not true. But Rachel saw it, the faint flicker in his eyes, the same one Alvarez had noticed in the body cam footage. She stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper, meant for the jury's ears more than his. The truth has a way of coming out, officer. And sometimes, it doesn't come from the ones trained to tell it. When court adjourned that day, Alvarez stood outside the courthouse steps, watching reporters swarm Emily as she left the building. Their microphones reached for her like claws. Miss Harper, did you hear what Officer Daniels said? Do you believe the police lied in their report? Is it true your child witnessed the shooting? Emily shielded her face and kept walking, Noah's small hand wrapped tightly in hers. Alvarez followed at a distance, not to interfere, but to ensure she got to her car safely. He saw the weariness in her movements, not just physical, but spiritual. A woman caught between truth and disbelief, trying to hold her life together with trembling fingers. As her car door shut and the reporters scattered, Alvarez turned back toward the courthouse steps. The sun was setting, painting the stone walls in shades of gold and gray, colors of both truth and denial. He thought about Daniels, about Rex, about the chain of split-second reactions that had brought them all here. And then about Noah, a child who had no agenda, no training, no reason to lie. Doggy hurt him, Alvarez murmured, the words still haunting him like an echo from somewhere deeper than the case itself. Tomorrow, the defense would submit a motion, one that would shock everyone in the room. Rachel intended to call the one witness nobody expected, the child. And when that day came, the courtroom would never sound the same again. The next morning, the courthouse looked different. The same cold marble halls, the same echoing footsteps, but the air felt tighter, more fragile. Everyone could sense it. There was an unspoken awareness that today would be unlike any other day of testimony. Because today, a 3-year-old boy was going to take the stand. Rachel Green arrived early, clutching a folder that held nothing but a single sheet of paper, motioned to permit limited child testimony. The document had already been debated, objected to, and nearly denied. But after days of arguments, the judge had finally agreed Noah Harper could testify under controlled conditions, with a child psychologist present. It wasn't standard procedure. It wasn't even comfortable. But the truth, Rachel reminded herself, rarely is. She stopped just outside the courtroom doors, looking down the hallway where Emily stood with Noah in her arms. The boy clung to her neck, his tiny fingers wrapped around her hair. His eyes were big and unsure, scanning the crowd of uniforms and strangers. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Rachel asked softly. Emily's voice trembled. "No, but I'll do anything if it means they'll listen." Rachel nodded, her expression gentle but steady. "They will today." Inside the courtroom, a hush settled over the spectators as the judge entered. Reporters filled the back rows, pens poised, cameras forbidden, but imaginations ready. Officer Daniels sat at the defense table with his attorney, his face unreadable, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of something unease, maybe fear. Detective Alvarez sat quietly near the back, arms folded, watching. He hadn't been called to testify again, but he couldn't stay away. Not after everything he'd seen in the footage, and not after the words that still haunted him. Doggy hurt him. Judge Peterson cleared his throat. "Before we proceed, I want to remind everyone that this will be handled with utmost care. The witness is a minor, and his participation is strictly limited. No direct cross-examination will be permitted. The psychologist, Dr. Haynes, will facilitate all communication." Rachel stood. "Your Honor, the defense calls Noah Harper." A ripple of murmurs spread across the courtroom. Daniel stiffened, his jaw tightening. The prosecutor leaned toward him, whispering sharply, but Daniels didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on the doorway. And then the door opened. Noah walked in holding his mother's hand. He wore a little blue sweater with a stitched yellow star on it and mismatched sneakers that squeaked softly on the floor. His stuffed rabbit peeked out from under his arm, a small guardian against the unknown. Emily knelt beside him, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Just tell the truth." The judge smiled faintly. "Hello, Noah. My name is Judge Peterson. Do you know why you're here today?" Noah blinked, his voice barely above a whisper. "To talk about the doggy." The courtroom froze. Every word out of his mouth carried the weight of 1,000 adult accusations, yet spoken with the purity only a child could hold. "Dr. Haynes?" A calm woman in her 40s with soft eyes took a seat beside Noah. "Hi. Noah, my name's Dr. Haynes. I just want to talk to you, okay? You can tell me what you remember." "Can you do that?" He nodded, clutching his rabbit tighter. Rachel stepped forward slightly, but kept her voice gentle. "Noah, do you remember the night when the police came to your house?" He hesitated, eyes drifting toward Emily. "Yes? What happened?" His small brow furrowed, as if trying to gather the fragments of memory. "Mommy was crying. Mark was loud. Then the lights came." "What kind of lights?" "Red and blue. Like Christmas, but not happy." A soft chuckle escaped somewhere in the gallery, quickly silenced by the judge's glare. Dr. Haynes smiled encouragingly. "And then what did you see, Noah?" "The doggy came in," Noah said. "He barked a lot. Mark said, 'Stop, please.' But the doggy ran and bit him." Rachel took a step closer. "And then what happened?" "The loud bang," Noah whispered, covering his ears. "It hurt my head. Mommy screamed. Mark fell down." A tear rolled down Emily's cheek. Daniel shifted in his seat, eyes fixed on the child, who now held his fate in his tiny hands. Dr. Haynes leaned in. "Noah, did the man Mark try to hurt the police?" He shook his head. No, he had his hands up. Like this. He raised his small arms in the air, mimicking surrender. The air went still. Rachel's voice trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from awe. And what about the doggy, Noah? Did the man tell the doggy to do anything? No, Noah said softly. The doggy jumped first. He bit Mark's arm. Then the loud noise came. Do you know who made the loud noise? Noah pointed a small finger across the room toward Officer Daniels. The courtroom collectively inhaled. Daniels' attorney immediately stood. Objection, Your Honor. The child cannot. Sit down, Counselor, Judge Peterson said firmly. This is his recollection. Let him speak. Noah's gaze didn't waver. He made the loud noise, he said, voice barely a whisper. Daniels looked as though the air had been sucked out of him. His lawyer placed a hand on his arm, but Daniels didn't move. For the first time since the trial began, the uniform seemed to shrink around him. When the questioning ended, Dr. Haynes smiled at Noah. You did very well, sweetheart. You were very brave. He nodded shyly. Can I go see Mommy now? The judge's voice softened. Yes, you can, son. Emily rushed forward, scooping him into her arms. Reporters outside would later write that she held him like a woman gripping the last good thing in a world that kept trying to take everything away. As she carried him past the defense table, Noah's eyes caught sight of a movement officer Daniels, standing beside his chair, frozen. Rex wasn't there, but in that quiet moment, it was as if Noah saw him anyway. The child turned his head slightly, whispering something only Emily could hear. Doggy didn't mean to be bad. Emily kissed his forehead, whispering, I know, baby. I know. When the courtroom cleared for recess, Alvarez lingered by the doors. He watched Daniels standing by the defense table, shoulders slumped, head bowed. It wasn't defiance anymore, it was exhaustion. Alvarez approached slowly. Rough day, officer. Daniels looked up, eyes hollow. He's just a kid. Yeah, Alvarez said. That's what makes it harder to lie to him. Daniels exhaled shakily. You think I wanted this? You think I haven't seen it every night since it happened? Alvarez studied him for a long moment. Maybe not. But you let the report say what made it easier, didn't you? Daniels didn't answer. You're not the only one who has to live with it, Alvarez added quietly. That kid's gonna carry it too. So you better decide which part of this story you want him to remember, the lie or the truth. Then he walked away, leaving Daniels alone in the echoing silence of the courtroom. Outside, cameras flashed as Emily and Noah exited through the side doors. Rachel shielded them as best she could, guiding them to a waiting car. Emily buckled Noah into his seat, her hands shaking. You did so good, she whispered, brushing his hair back. He smiled sleepily. Did I help Mark? Her eyes filled again, but this time her tears were warm. Yes, baby. You helped him a lot. Noah hugged his rabbit, murmured something soft, and drifted off to sleep as the car pulled away. Back inside, Daniels sat alone in the courtroom, staring at the empty witness chair. For the first time, he let the words replay in his mind exactly as he'd heard them from the boy's lips. The doggy jumped first. He had his hands up. You made the loud noise. Each phrase cut deeper than any cross-examination ever could. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph him and Rex from the academy. The day they'd been certified, smiling like men who believed in the purity of service. But that was before a single second of panic undid a lifetime of training. As the courthouse lights dimmed, Daniels whispered into the empty room, I'm sorry. And though no one heard him, the words hung there quiet, fragile, and heavy with truth. Tomorrow, everything would change again. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall courtroom windows, cutting across the oak benches in golden bands. For once, even the reporters were quiet, their pens still. Everyone knew this was the day the defense would present its final argument, and Rachel Green had a plan no one expected. When she walked in, her expression was calm, but her pulse thundered in her ears. Weeks of sleepless nights had led to this. She'd rewatched every frame of footage, replayed every detail of testimony, and still, the truth remained buried beneath procedure and pride. But today, she intended to dig it out. Emily sat near the front, hands clasped in her lap, her eyes weary but determined. Beside her, Noah rested his chin on his stuffed rabbit. He wasn't supposed to be there again, not officially, but Rachel had made sure they arrived early, before the crowd, before the storm. Detective Alvarez approached Rachel quietly before the proceedings began. "I pulled some of the body cam metadata you asked for. You were right. There's a 3-second drop before the trigger pull." Daniels muted it manually. Rachel's jaw clenched. "And the department didn't flag that?" He shook his head. "They marked it as unintended device malfunction. But that's not a glitch, Rachel. That's fear." She took the flash drive he handed her and slipped it into her folder. "Fear or guilt," she murmured. "Either way, it's the same thing in court." When the gavel struck, silence fell. Judge Peterson cleared his throat. "Ms. Green, you may proceed with your final presentation." Rachel rose slowly, feeling the eyes of every juror, every camera, every skeptic. "Your Honor, before I make my closing statement, the defense requests a brief demonstration using the department's K-9 unit, Rex." The prosecutor shot up. "Objection, Your Honor. That's irrelevant and inflammatory. The dog's behavior at this stage cannot be—" "It's directly relevant," Rachel interrupted. "This animal's reactions and training are the cornerstone of the state's narrative. My client's life was nearly destroyed because of it. The jury deserves to see what kind of trigger response this K-9 is conditioned for." Judge Peterson hesitated. His fingers drummed against the bench. "You're walking a fine line, Counselor." "I'm aware, Your Honor, but the truth demands context." After a tense pause, he sighed. "Very well. But one wrong move, and I end it. Proceed." The bailiff opened a side door, and the room's temperature seemed to drop a degree when Rex entered. The German shepherd's presence commanded the space instantly muscular, alert, eyes sharp. Daniels walked beside him, the leash taut between them. His face was pale, unreadable. Rachel stepped forward, her voice calm. "Officer Daniels, this is your K-9 partner, correct?" "Yes. And Rex has been your partner for 3 years?" He nodded once. Rachel turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this dog has been described as perfectly trained, completely obedient, incapable of error. Yet 3 seconds of missing footage stand between a man's freedom and a mistaken shot." The prosecutor rose again. "Your Honor, this line of questioning—" "Sit down, Mr. Lane," the judge said. "Let's see where this goes." Rachel motioned to a court officer holding a padded training sleeve. "With permission, we'll conduct a simple call-and-hold demonstration." Daniel's jaw flexed. "Rex doesn't respond well outside official conditions." "That's fine," Rachel said coolly. "Let's recreate the conditions." Daniels called out sharply, "Rex, heel." The dog obeyed instantly, sitting, eyes focused. Rachel's voice remained soft, almost sympathetic. "Officer, would you mind removing Rex's muzzle?" Daniels hesitated. "That's not necessary." "Please. The jury should see exactly how reactive he is under stress." Reluctantly, Daniels unlatched the muzzle. Rex's ears twitched, alert. Rachel nodded to the officer in the training sleeve, who lifted his arms in mock surrender. "Hands up," Rachel said quietly, echoing Noah's testimony. "Let's see what happens when someone raises their hands." The officer stepped forward slowly. Rex's muscles tensed. His low growl filled the room. Rachel took a slow breath. Notice how Rex interprets the motion. No aggressive stance, no shout, just raised hands. Daniels murmured a command under his breath too softly. Rex snapped forward, barking violently, straining against the leash. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Control that animal, officer. Daniels yanked Rex back, struggling to restrain him. Rachel didn't move. Her voice was calm, sharp as glass. This, Your Honor, is the same reaction that preceded the gunshot in question. Mark Harper's only move that night was raising his hands. The courtroom buzzed. Reporters scribbled frantically. Rachel turned toward the projection screen, where the footage from Daniel's body cam flickered to life. The 3-second cut was there, a flicker of static. Then the audio returned mid-bark, right before the gunshot. But now, with Alvarez's recovered file, Rachel pressed play on the repaired version. The missing audio filled the courtroom. Daniel's voice panicked. Rex, stop! No, hold. Hold. Then, the gunshot. Then silence. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Rachel looked toward the jurors. You heard it. A frightened officer, an overreactive dog, and a man who never raised a hand in violence. Everything that followed, the arrest, the charge, the trauma was built on that lie. She turned toward Daniels. Officer, do you deny that you manually muted your body cam before that command? Daniels' lawyer jumped up. He will not answer that, Your Honor. But Daniels spoke anyway, voice hollow. I thought it glitched. Rachel's eyes locked onto his. You thought or you hoped? Daniel's throat tightened. I didn't mean for it to happen. The judge's voice cut through the tension. Officer, are you admitting to muting your camera during an active response? Daniels looked down at Rex, then up again. Yes. The room exploded in whispers. Cameras flashed even though they weren't supposed to. The judge struck his gavel hard. Order. I will have order in this court. But the damage was done. The entire story, the clean report, the hero narrative, the departmental cover was unraveling in real time. And then came the moment no one could have scripted. From the front row, a small voice rose above the chaos. Doggy didn't mean to be bad. Everyone turned. Noah stood beside his mother, his stuffed rabbit dangling by one ear. His face was innocent, calm, the only island of peace in a storm of adult guilt. He pointed toward Rex, who sat quietly now, tail tucked, ears low. That's the doggy who bit the man, Noah said clearly. Not the bad man. The doggy got scared. Rachel froze. The jurors did too. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Even the judge lowered his gavel slowly, his eyes softening. Daniels stared at Noah, the child's words sinking deep into the hollow space guilt had carved inside him. His lips trembled as he whispered, He's right. The silence that followed wasn't just stillness, it was collective realization. Rachel felt her throat tighten as she spoke. Your Honor, I think the truth is spoken for itself. The defense rests. The judge nodded slowly. Court will recess until this afternoon. Officer Daniels remain available for recall. Daniels gave a small, defeated nod. When the room cleared, Emily knelt beside her son. You did it again, sweetheart. You told the truth. He smiled sleepily, unbothered by the weight of the world he'd just shifted. Can we go home now, Mommy? Yes, she whispered, kissing his forehead. We can go home. Rachel watched them leave, her heart aching with both relief and sorrow. Justice wasn't a clean victory. It never was. But for the first time in months, the truth had a voice, and it wasn't hers. It was a child's. As Daniels exited through the side door, Alvarez caught up with him. "You gonna turn in your badge?" Alvarez asked. Daniels stared ahead. "Yeah, I think it's time. What about Rex?" Daniels looked down at the dog. Rex's eyes met his, uncertain. "He's not to blame. I'll make sure he goes somewhere peaceful. Maybe a farm. Somewhere he won't have to prove he's a hero anymore." Alvarez nodded. "You did the right thing, finally." Daniels gave a faint, tired smile. "No, the kid did." Later, as the courthouse emptied into the orange glow of sunset, a gentle breeze rustled the flags outside. Inside, the witness chair sat empty, bathed in fading light. And for those who had been there, who had heard a 3-year-old speak truth to a room full of grown men, the memory of that moment would never fade. The courtroom had frozen not from fear, but from awakening. Because in that stillness, they had all realized the same thing sometimes. It takes the smallest voice to make the world stop and listen. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the high courtroom windows when Judge Peterson called the session back into order. The air felt heavier than before, like everyone knew the ground beneath them had shifted. The jurors filed in quietly, whispering among themselves. Reporters tapped their pens, their anticipation palpable. Rachel Green stood at the defense table, the flash drive from Detective Alvarez clutched in her palm. She had the evidence. What she needed now was the moment that would break the dam completely. Officer Daniels sat beside his attorney, his uniform now looking like a burden instead of armor. He had barely spoken since the morning session, since Noah's voice, tiny, honest, and impossible to ignore, had named him as the man who made the loud noise. The courtroom had frozen then, but now it simmered with something far more volatile. Truth on the verge of eruption. Judge Peterson adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Green, are you prepared to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said. Her voice was steady, but inside she could feel her pulse against her ribs. "Then begin." Rachel glanced at the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case has revolved around a question that should have been answered from day one. What really happened in that house? The state told you Officer Daniels followed procedure, that Rex the K-9 acted in defense. But we now know that the footage you were shown was incomplete." She lifted the flash drive. "This recovered by Detective Alvarez contains the missing audio. The 3 seconds that were manually muted." A ripple of murmurs moved across the room. The prosecutor jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. That file hasn't been authenticated by the department. It's been verified by the original body cam metadata," Rachel said. "If the state wishes to challenge that, I'd be happy to call Detective Alvarez back to the stand." Judge Peterson leaned forward. "Mr. Lane, sit down. Let's hear it." The bailiff dimmed the lights, and the monitor flickered to life. For a moment, the screen showed the familiar view Daniels' perspective. Rex ahead of him, the sound of shouting, the flashlight beam slicing through the dark hallway. Then came the static. Rachel nodded to the technician. "Play the recovered audio." Through the speakers, the sound of heavy breathing filled the room. Daniel's voice trembled, not the confident tone they'd heard before, but raw fear. "Rex, no Rex, he'll stop." A bark, a snarl. Then another shout. "Hold," I said, "hold." And then the gunshot. The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel turned toward the jury, her expression soft but unflinching. "That is the truth. Not the edited version the department approved. Not the report Daniels signed. The truth." Daniel's lawyer buried his face in his hands. The prosecutor's pen slipped from his fingers. The judge sat back slowly, as if the air itself had become too heavy to move through. Rachel continued, her voice lowering but her conviction rising. "Mark Harper didn't charge anyone. He didn't attack. He surrendered. But an officer, startled by his own partner's mistake, fired his weapon, and then muted his body cam to hide his panic. Her words echoed against the wooden walls. The law calls that misconduct. The human heart calls it guilt. She paused, letting the silence sink in. Emily, sitting behind her, pressed a hand over her mouth. Tears streamed silently down her face as she watched the replay, seeing for the first time the truth she had always known in her bones. And then, without warning, Daniel stood. "Your Honor," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need to speak." His attorney grabbed his arm. "Sit down, officer. Don't say another word." But Daniels shook him off. "No, not this time." Judge Peterson looked startled. "Officer Daniels, I advise you to." "I know what you'll advise," Daniels interrupted, his voice breaking. "But I've spent months hiding behind procedure, reports, and lawyers. And a 3-year-old boy walked into this courtroom and told more truth in 5 words than I have in my entire career." The room went still. Daniels swallowed hard, staring at the floor. It wasn't Mark Harper's fault. Rex jumped first. He's trained to respond to sudden movement. I didn't see what was happening clearly. I panicked. I fired because I thought he was lunging at us. When I realized he wasn't, I muted the camera. I didn't want to lose everything. He looked up, his voice trembling. But I already did. Rachel stood motionless, watching as every layer of his defense fell away. The judge's face softened, though his voice remained formal. "Officer Daniels, you understand that what you've just said constitutes a confession to perjury and misconduct?" Daniels nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "I do." The prosecutor stood, face pale. "Your Honor, the state requests an immediate recess to review this new admission." Judge Peterson banged his gavel once. "Granted." As the courtroom emptied into stunned silence, Daniels remained standing, staring at the empty witness chair where Noah had once sat. Outside in the hallway, the world erupted. Reporters swarmed, cameras rolled, microphones filled the air like a storm of noise. Words like confession, body cam, and cover-up bounced off the marble walls. Emily tried to shield Noah again, pulling him close. "Keep your head down, baby." But Noah peeked up at her and smiled. Did the bad man tell the truth now? Emily nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, sweetheart." He did. Rachel stood beside them, exhausted but proud. "You did that, Noah. You made him tell it." He yawned. "I just told what I saw?" Rachel laughed softly. "Sometimes that's all the world needs." Back inside, Alvarez approached Daniels quietly. The officer was still seated, staring blankly at the empty stand. "You did the right thing," Alvarez said. Daniels didn't look up. Too late for right things. "Not for them," Alvarez said, nodding toward the door where Emily and Noah had gone. "And not for Rex either. You tell the truth now, and maybe that dog gets to stop being a weapon." Daniel's eyes flickered with pain. He was just doing what he was trained for. "Yeah," Alvarez replied. "And so were you." Daniels closed his eyes. "That's what scares me the most." Hours later, as the courthouse emptied into twilight, Rachel sat alone in the defense office. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, a familiar kind of exhaustion. She reread her notes, but her mind kept replaying Noah's words. Doggy heard him. Those 3 words had cracked open a wall of silence, stronger than any law or bureaucracy. Emily entered quietly, Noah asleep on her shoulder. "It's over, isn't it?" Rachel looked up. "For today, yes. The charges will be dropped once the paperwork clears." Emily exhaled, her entire body trembling with release. "I don't even know how to thank you." Rachel smiled softly. "You already did by trusting me." Emily hesitated, then asked, "What will happen to Officer Daniels?" Rachel paused. "He'll face a review, maybe criminal charges. But I think the worst punishment is what he'll live with now. Emily nodded. Guilt doesn't need a courtroom. She turned to leave, then added, "Tell Detective Alvarez. Thank you for believing me when no one else did." "I will," Rachel said. As they walked out into the cool night, Emily adjusted Noah's blanket. The courthouse loomed behind them like a sleeping giant, the lights glowing dimly in the windows. In the distance, thunder rolled a storm on the horizon. But for the first time in months, Emily didn't feel afraid. She looked down at Noah, sleeping peacefully, his small fingers still clutching the ear of his rabbit. "Justice," she whispered, not to anyone in particular. "Real justice." Rachel joined her at the curb. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think justice was about winning. But maybe it's just about being brave enough to speak the truth." Emily smiled faintly. "Then I guess Noah's the bravest of all of us." Across town, in a small police kennel, Rex lay awake. The sounds of other dogs echoed faintly, but he stayed still, his golden eyes open in the dark. In his sleep, he sometimes twitched ears flicking, paws moving as if chasing something unseen. Maybe memory, maybe regret. And somewhere deep inside, perhaps even the loyal dog knew, he hadn't been the villain either. Fear had done what fear always does, it blurred the lines between duty and disaster. But now, at last, the truth had unblurred them. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, for the first time, there was peace. Not silence born of fear, but silence born of truth. The storm that had gathered over the courthouse the day before broke overnight. Morning arrived gray and soaked in rain, the streets outside lined with news vans. Reporters braved the drizzle, their umbrellas glinting under streetlights as they prepared for the announcement everyone was waiting for: the verdict and the fallout. By 9 a.m., Cedar Falls was no longer just a small American town. It had become a headline. Inside the courthouse, Rachel Green stood in front of the defense table, scanning a sea of cameras and strangers. Her suit was pressed, her expression calm, but her mind raced. She had won at least legally, but victory in cases like this always carried a hollow echo. Emily sat behind her, Noah perched in her lap. The boy was wearing the same little blue sweater he'd worn on the stand. He held his rabbit close, oblivious to the storm of flashbulbs beyond the window. "Are they mad at us, Mommy?" he asked, his voice soft. Emily smiled faintly. "No, baby. They're just talking about what you did." "What did I do?" "You told the truth." Noah looked puzzled. "Isn't that what people are supposed to do?" Emily's smile faltered. "Yeah, sweetheart, it is." At the front of the courtroom, Judge Peterson entered. His robes looked heavier than usual, his eyes tired. He had spent the night reviewing Daniel's confession, the body cam evidence, and the legal motions that followed. Justice, he knew, wasn't a clean process. It was muddy, painful, and rarely satisfying to anyone. He struck his gavel once. Court is in session. The hum of whispers died instantly. This court finds that the evidence against Mr. Mark Harper was tainted by procedural misconduct and falsification of official reporting. All charges are hereby dismissed. The words rippled through the room like a wave. Emily gasped. Rachel exhaled sharply. Reporters scrambled to write, fingers flying across keyboards. But Judge Peterson wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, "this court refers Officer Michael Daniels to the state attorney for review and disciplinary action. Effective immediately, he is suspended from duty pending investigation." Daniels, seated across the aisle, didn't move. He'd expected this. In fact, he'd been expecting worse. He stood slowly, his lawyer whispering frantically beside him, but Daniels ignored him. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge hesitated. Briefly. Daniels nodded. His voice cracked slightly when he began. I've been a police officer for 15 years. I joined to serve at tucked people. But somewhere along the way, I started protecting the wrong things. My badge, my pride, my fear. He looked toward Emily and Noah. That night, I thought I was doing my job. I told myself I fired because I had to. But the truth is, I fired because I was afraid. He paused, his throat tightening. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of losing control. And in trying to save myself, I hurt a man who didn't deserve it, and a family that will never forget it. The silence that followed was thick, almost sacred. I'm sorry, Daniels finished quietly. To Mark Harper, to Emily, and to that little boy. Noah peeked up from his mother's arms, eyes wide. He whispered, "It's okay, mister." The courtroom broke into a low murmur of awe and heartbreak. Outside, the press pounced as soon as the doors opened. Microphones, camera lights, the smell of wet asphalt. It was chaos. Rachel tried to shield Emily and Noah, but questions still flew like rain. Ms. Harper, do you forgive Officer Daniels? Ms. Green, will you be filing civil charges? Do you think the police covered this up intentionally? Emily didn't answer. She just held Noah close and walked toward the waiting car. Inside, as they pulled away, she looked back at the courthouse, a tall, gray building swallowed in the rain, and whispered, "It's over." But Rachel, sitting beside her, shook her head. "No, it's just beginning." By evening, the story had exploded nationwide. News anchors recited it like a parable of modern America: fear, justice, and the voice of an innocent child. Headlines blazed across every channel. Toddler's testimony frees wrongly accused man. Officer confesses after 3-year-old identifies police dog in court. Body cam silence, the 3 seconds that changed a verdict. Social media erupted with outrage, compassion, and debate. Some hailed Noah as a symbol of truth. Others questioned whether a child that young should ever be placed on the stand. But everyone agreed on one thing. The system had failed, and somehow, a 3-year-old had fixed it. In the weeks that followed, consequences unfolded quietly, but steadily. Officer Daniels turned in his badge. The police department issued a formal apology to the Harper family, though it was as cold and bureaucratic as every other apology ever written by a committee. Rex was retired from service, sent to a rehabilitation program for retired canines south in rural Montana. Daniels drove him there himself. On the way, he stopped by the park on the edge of town, a quiet stretch of grass and trees where the wind sounded like waves. He let Rex out of the car, unlatched the leash, and watched the dog run for the first time in months. No commands. No barking. Just freedom. "Go," he said softly. "You don't owe anyone anything anymore." Rex stopped once, looked back, and then bounded into the field. Daniels stood there for a long time, rain soaking his uniform one last time before he folded it carefully and placed it in the trunk. He wasn't sure who he was without it. But maybe, for once, that was a start. Meanwhile, Emily and Mark began to rebuild their lives. Mark had been released from custody 2 days after the ruling. The scars on his arm had healed, but the ones on his spirit took longer. For weeks, he'd wake up at night, gasping from dreams of sirens and barking. Emily would hold him until he calmed down, whispering, "It's over, love. It's over." They sold the house on Cedar Street. Too many memories there. The shattered glass, the blood, the yellow tape. They moved to a quiet suburb outside Des Moines, where the nights were calm and no one recognized them from the news. Mark found work again, fixing engines at a local garage. Emily started painting, something she hadn't done in years. And Noah, he just grew. Every morning, He'd play with the neighbor's golden retriever, laughing freely, unafraid. Months later, Rachel received a letter at her office. No return address, just a single folded page. It read, "Ms. Green, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say thank you for forcing the truth out of me. I've joined a community outreach program for retired officers. We teach new recruits about accountability, fear, and what it really means to serve. Maybe it's not enough, but it's something. Tell that boy he reminded me what courage looks like." Michael Daniels. Rachel folded the letter slowly, setting it on her desk. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Maybe that's what justice looks like," she whispered. On a quiet evening months later, Emily took Noah to a town fair. There were rides, lights, music, the kind of normalcy she'd stopped believing in. As they watched the fireworks light up the sky, Noah looked up and asked, "Mommy, is Mark happy now?" She nodded. "Yes, baby. We all are." Noah grinned. "Even the doggy?" Emily laughed, brushing his hair back. "Yeah, even the doggy." In another corner of the country, far away from the flashing cameras and courtroom lights, Rex lay on a patch of soft grass, head resting on his paws as he watched the sunset. Somewhere in his dreams, a child's voice echoed, gently innocent, forgiving. Doggy didn't mean to be bad. And for once, the world felt quiet again. Because after months of chaos, heartbreak, and guilt, truth had done what it always does. It had settled the noise and left behind only the sound of peace. The fireworks cracked open the sky like bright, trembling veins of color. Noah clapped his hands, the reflection of red and gold sparking in his eyes. Around them, laughter filled the air, families sharing popcorn, teenagers shouting from the Ferris wheel, music echoing across the fairgrounds. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily breathed without fear. She looked down at her son, hair ruffled by the evening breeze, face sticky with cotton candy, and realized how fragile and precious peace could be. Her phone buzzed in her purse, but she didn't check it. Not tonight. Tonight was for Noah. Across the fairground, Mark was helping a vendor fix a broken generator. He still carried a limp, faint but visible when he walked too fast, but his face had color again, his laugh had weight. When he spotted Emily and Noah near the carousel, his expression softened into something unguarded, almost boyish. He waved, and Noah, spotting him, screamed, "Daddy!" Emily turned just in time to see Noah bolt from her side, running through the crowd with his little arms wide open. Mark dropped his wrench and caught him mid-run, spinning him in the air. For a fleeting second, time stood still. A father, a son, and the echo of something pure. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek before it could fall. She didn't want anyone to see. Later that night, after the fair, the three of them sat in their small living room. A half-empty popcorn bucket sat on the coffee table. The hum of a refrigerator filled the quiet. Mark leaned back in his chair. "I keep thinking about it, Em," he said softly. "How close we came to losing everything." Emily looked at him from across the room. "You didn't lose everything." He smiled faintly. "No, just enough to remember what matters." There was a silence between them, heavy but not painful, the kind that comes when words have already done their job. From his spot on the couch, Noah was asleep, one hand clutching his stuffed rabbit, the other curled against his cheek. Emily stood, pulled a blanket over him, and whispered, "You saved us, little one." The weeks turned into months. Life moved on in quiet, unremarkable ways. But the story refused to die. News outlets followed up relentlessly. Editorials, talk shows, documentaries. Rachel Green appeared on a national morning program, speaking about the flaws in the justice system, about how truth is often buried beneath fear. When asked about Noah, she smiled and said, He reminded everyone what honesty looks like when it isn't filtered by fear or politics. Sometimes all justice needs is someone who doesn't know how to lie. The clip went viral. Millions shared it. But for Emily and Mark, fame had long lost its appeal. One autumn morning, a letter arrived in the mail addressed to Noah Harper. The handwriting was neat, careful, military, almost. Inside was a small envelope and a note. Dear Noah, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. You told the truth when no one else could. Because of you, I learned how to do the same. I wanted you to have this. It's a medal I earned a long time ago for bravery, but I think it belongs to you now. Your friend, Michael Daniels' Emily, held the medal in her palm. It was small and silver, tarnished at the edges. She didn't cry, but her hands trembled. Noah, curious, asked, "What's that?" She smiled. "It's a thank you, sweetheart, from someone who learned from you. Can I keep it?" "Of course. Just remember, it's not for fighting. It's for being brave." Noah nodded, serious beyond his years. "Like telling the truth?" Emily kissed his forehead. "Exactly like that." Months later, Emily began painting again, not just as a hobby, but with purpose. She painted Noah's small hands clutching a rabbit. She painted a courtroom bathed in sunlight. She painted a police officer standing alone in the rain, looking down at his empty badge. Her art caught attention in the local gallery scene. People said her paintings carried the ache of truth. She just called them memories. When she sold her first piece, titled The Innocent Voice, she used the money to start a small charity fund helping families who'd been wrongfully accused or caught in the cracks of the system. Mark built a small website for it in their kitchen one night, his fingers tapping on the old laptop. "What should we call it?" he asked. Emily thought for a moment, then smiled. Project Blue Rabbit. By spring, the fund had grown beyond their imagination. Rachel joined as a legal consultant, helping families with early investigations before cases escalated. The first family they assisted was a young single mother falsely accused of neglect. Emily visited her personally, holding her baby while she cried. For the first time, Emily understood something deep. Justice wasn't just about winning a case. It was about helping someone breathe again. And every time she watched Noah play in the grass with a neighbor's golden retriever, she knew their pain had turned into something meaningful. In another state, far north, snow dusted the pines of a quiet ranch in Montana. A small sign read Evergreen Canine Retirement Sanctuary. Rex was older now, slower, but his eyes still burned bright when he ran through the snow. Michael Daniels volunteered. There every weekend, cleaning kennels, feeding the dogs, teaching new trainers about restraint and trust. Sometimes at dusk, he'd sit on the porch steps, a cup of coffee in hand, staring at the horizon. He'd replay that courtroom moment in his mind, not as a wound, but as a lesson carved into his bones. The child's voice still echoed. "That's the doggy who bit the man, not the bad man." He whispered to himself, "Out of the mouths of babes, the truth always comes." Then he'd toss Rex a stick and smile faintly when the old dog still managed to fetch it. A year after the trial, the local news revisited the Harpers for a follow-up story. They declined interviews at first, but eventually agreed to a short one-off camera. In it, Emily said quietly, "We didn't want to be symbols. We just wanted peace. But if our story helps one person stand up and tell the truth, then it's worth it." Mark added, "Justice isn't perfect, but it's still worth fighting for." And Noah? When asked if he remembered what happened that day in court, he just shrugged. The doggy was scared. The man was scared. "I just wanted everyone to stop yelling." The reporter smiled. "That's very wise." Noah grinned, proud of himself. "Mommy says being kind is smarter than being right." Emily nodded. "She's right about that too." On the anniversary of the verdict, the family visited the courthouse once more. There were no reporters this time, no flashing lights, just silence. They placed a small bouquet of daisies on the courthouse steps. Attached was a note in a child's handwriting. "Thank you for listening to me." As they walked away, the sun broke through the clouds, warm and bright. Emily looked back one last time, her heart steady. The courthouse no longer looked like a place of fear. It looked like a monument to something bigger than any of them. Truth, courage, redemption. That night, back at home, Emily tucked Noah into bed. The medal from Daniels hung on his nightstand, glinting in the moonlight. "Mommy?" Noah murmured sleepily. "Is the doggy still okay?" Emily smiled. "Yes, baby. He's happy now." "Good." His voice drifted into a whisper. "Everybody should be happy." She brushed his hair and kissed his forehead. "Sleep, my brave boy." Outside, the crickets sang. The wind carried the smell of rain. And in the quiet heart of a small town that had once trembled with fear, peace finally returned. Not with fanfare, but with the soft breathing of a child who had told the truth and changed everything. Because sometimes it doesn't take power or experience to bring justice, just a voice pure enough to be heard.